Good evening, everyone. We're going to start in about 5 or 10 minutes. The members are finishing up a vote, and they've left Capitol Hill. They're en route, but we just wanted everybody to know that we'll be starting as soon as they get here. Just want everybody to know since it's 7:30, so they're on the way. We'll start in a few minutes.
Was it that we submitted late, or she just didn't have it? I read in your email that she submitted, that we submitted. Right. Right. Not really. Not really. Do you want to pull back? Pull it back? And do you have an alternate person? Or well, you let me know. You know, I don't know whether they will allow us to pull it back. Just let me know. Yeah. 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 Okay. All right.
Sorry about that. I don't have to. Do I have to hop up and stand up? Oh, so I shouldn't have this speech in my hand. I guess I'm not gonna use the speech. I have 2 orders. Miguel, it's conversational.
right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started tonight. It's a very important conversation on immigration reform in Black America. My name is Greg Carr, and I'm the chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies here at Howard University. We are very pleased today to be hosting members of our extended family, no strangers to Howard, these folks here on our podium, members of Congress and members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and also the Immigration Reform Taskforce, which is very important, as well as a young brother who has been doing some very important action, important work around immigration reform and policy reform. We are streaming live at www.facebook.com/Congressional Black Caucus, all one word. And we will be taking questions later in the program. And anybody's got a cell phone, and I'm assuming that's everybody with some form of a social media connected device who uses Twitter to tweet. I guess you could use it for other things, but at least if you're using it to tweet, we are at official CBC. One more time, at official CBC. Also at Howard U. We have a very active Howard Twitter account, so also at Howard U. Discussing immigration in Black America. Hashtag CBC Talks. If I'm speaking a foreign language to you, it's okay. There are a number of people in here who know exactly what I just said. I just found out what I just said several months ago, so hashtag CBC Talks. With that in mind, I'm going to ask to come to the podium, brother representing the university on behalf of the Office of the President and Howard University in general, the Senior Assistant to the President, Dr. Alvin Thornton. Please, Dr. Thornton.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the capstone. Welcome to Howard University, and thank you, Dr. Carr. I want to, first of all, on behalf of the President and our Provost, Wayne Frederick, and the faculty and staff and students and alumni, welcome each of you to this evening's event. The School of Social Work, I want to thank you all, Dean Snell and Dean Crew, and all of the faculty members for organizing this event. There's not a better place that this could be taking place than Howard University. Dr. Scott, thank you for facilitating this event also, and also to Ms. Drain, who's the new Executive Director of the Congressional Black Caucus. I say that because what President Rabo has asked us to do is to expand our international footprint and to make sure that we cover that space on behalf of our people. And so this event allows that vision of the President and Howard University to be realized. And so I want to thank each of you for making this possible. Congressional Black Caucus members, I was thinking about this as I came here, Congresspersons Perrin Mitchell and Shirley Chisholm. This is why we're here. Those of us who are older, much older than you now, as I look at you, the Dellums of the world. We have Wrangleism here at Howard University in our center, Dr. Scott from the Wrangle Center, our Louis Stokes Library. Howard is the CBC, and we want you to know that we never take that for granted, that relationship, and the support that you provide for this university. We know what you do in terms of our funding, in terms of the status of Howard and the higher education agenda, so thank you on behalf of our president for what you do. It is also critically important that you've asked us to look at immigration reform and Black America, and that you've asked us to do that here at the capstone, because Howard is the essence of plural democracy and how you make it possible for different people to assemble in a democratic context and exist. Howard is the place that welcomes people. It is an international community. It has immigrants all over its faculty and students. So this is a very good place, and we thank you for understanding that, recognizing that, and coming to Howard University to allow us to assist you in that discourse. So I hope each of you will enjoy the evening and enjoy this discussion and learn from the wisdom and insight being brought to us by our members of Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Dr. Thornton was kidding before the program started, say he was from a earlier wave of immigration, a larger forced migration to this country. His folks ended up in L.A. James Brown from Lower Alabama, wasn't it, brother, in Mobile, and places like that. So with that in mind, we're actually now going to call to the stage a professor of social work and the immediate past associate dean of the School of Social Work, and that would be Dean Sandra Crew, please, on behalf of the School of Social Work.
Good evening, Dr. Thornton, Dr. Carr. Good evening. Again, I am Dr. Sandra Crew, Howard University School of Social Work. On behalf of our Dean, Dr. Kador L. Snell, our faculty, our students, our alumni, we welcome you to this occasion. It is fitting, in the School of Social Work, we would say it's a good fit for us to be here and have this dialogue with the Congressional Black Caucus. In thinking about the Congressional Black Caucus, we are reminded fondly of the former Congressman Ed Towns, who was one of our field instructors. And Congressman Towns always reminded us that as social workers, we are change agents. And this is an example of the change that we can have occur. Through one of our courses, Criminal Justice, we were able to have this dialogue about the importance of this discussion at Howard University. For over 75 years, the Howard University School of Social Work has been committed to enhancing human well-being and transforming social and economic conditions which impact African Americans, Africans in the diaspora, and other persons of color, as well as the global community. The guiding philosophy of the School of Social Work is the Black perspective that calls for the sensitivity to the experience of all oppressed and underserved groups and embraces an international dimension with special emphasis on Africa and the Caribbean. Our specializations in displaced populations, criminal justice, mental health, aging, family and services and family and child welfare really emphasize the importance of this dialogue, because in all of those specializations we focus on the concerns of immigrants as well as persons of color in this country. And we address poverty every day as we think about this topic. Tonight's conversation about immigration policy and immigration reform is consistent with the mission of our School of Social Work. But in thinking about this, I'm reminded of a session I had with the late Dr. Ron Walters about welfare reform. And we were in a session, and Congressional Black Caucus was involved at that point, and some of the members of the audience stated, what does immigration have to do with TANF and welfare reform? Well, Dr. Walters lost it for just a moment. He cleared his throat, and he said, if you do not understand this nexus, then we need to start from the beginning. We are not able to move forward until you get this. And I say to you, I agree wholeheartedly with Dr. Walters. Immigration policies, practices, and reforms are indeed the business of social work. When we think about women who are deported and they have to be relocated from their families, when we think of persons who are bullied because of a difference in their language, it is the business of social work. When we think about families who are separated by policies and practices, it is the business of social work. When we think about a family who cannot be housed because one member is a legal citizen and the other one is not, it is indeed policies and the business of social work. So tonight, we have the opportunity to share our passion about this topic with you. And again, we know that immigration reform, immigration policies, immigration practices, really, it is the business of all of us. And again, we welcome you. We are so excited about the students who are here. We know that some of you should be studying for exams. You have papers to do. But the fact that you are here really states the importance of this topic. And I really feel very warm that you know that this is of value to the profession. It's of value to the Howard community as a whole, and we welcome you for taking the time to dialogue about this important topic. Again, I welcome you.
Wonderful. I understand that Congressman Al Green from Texas has just arrived. Let me see. Very nice. Oh, thank you. Welcome. Welcome. This is the perfect place to have. As Dean Cruz said, we've been joined by a number of students, undergraduate and graduate students. There are several co-sponsors to the event, the African Students Association. We also have the NAACP student chapter, Delta Sigma Theta, a number of students here. And of course, anytime you have more than 3 people from Howard in the room, you've got the African world. So Dr. Scott, of course, the director of the Ron Walters Center, thinking about what you said, Dr. Thornton, in regard to Ron Walters, the great Ron Walters, in his book, Pan-Africanism and the African Diaspora. You know, his question was not when we became Americans alone, but when did we stop being Africans? And the answer to that was we didn't. So this is the place to have this conversation. Without further ado, then, I'm going to introduce everyone in turn and get out of y'all's way so we can hear some of this work and then begin the conversation. I guess I'll do it in order of how folks are seated. So to my left, to your right, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Brother Jeffries represents the 8th Congressional District of New York, has been appointed to the Budget and Judiciary Committees. I'm glad about that judiciary appointment especially, man. No question about that. In the 113th Congress, he looks forward to promoting economic growth, reforming the justice system, preventing gun violence, and assisting neighborhoods that were devastated by Superstorm Sandy. Prior to his election to Congress, Hakeem served for 6 years in the New York State Assembly, where he authored laws that protected civil liberties, encouraged the transformation of vacant luxury condominiums into affordable homes, always a popular type of legislation, and improving the civil court system. So that's Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, who will be speaking first after I finish introducing everyone. Thanks, brother. Next, of course, no stranger to Howard, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. A Brooklyn native, I guess I only had to ask the question Biggie would ask, where Brooklyn at? Clearly they're here. Whose roots are planted in her Jamaican heritage, absolutely. She represents the 9th Congressional District of New York, a product of the New York City public school system. Representative Clarke graduated from Oberlin College in Ohio, and prior to being elected to the United States House of Representatives, Representative Clarke served, as many of you well remember, I'm sure, on the New York City Council, representing the 40th District of Brooklyn. As the congressional representative of the 9th District, she is committed to continuing the district's legacy of excellence. Currently, in the 113th Congress, Representative Clarke sits on the committees of Homeland Security, Ethics, and Small Business. So, Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke. Thank you. Next to Congresswoman Clarke, we have Brother Alden Nesbitt. Brother Nesbitt is a Caribbean dreamer and co-chair of the International Youth Association. Is it Tia or Taya? How should I say? Tia. Excellent. Of course. He had the Ebonics. I should have known that. It wasn't Taya. It would never be no Taya. It would be Tia. That's exactly right. Alden is the son of a Caribbean teacher who was recruited by the New York City Department of Education to work in New York public school system. 12 years ago, in 2001, Alden's mother came to this country with her 3 children because she was promised a pathway to citizenship for herself and her family. Yet today, she has still not received her green card, and all 3 of her children have aged out of status. In 2011, Alden founded TIA, the International Youth Association, shortly after he found out that he was one of many Caribbean youth who had fallen victim to a shady recruitment process and a broken immigrant system. As a youth advocate, Alden has worked tirelessly to ensure that the plight of these Caribbean teachers and dreamers is known and to advocate for immigration reform that is inclusive of the black immigrant perspective. That's Brother Alden Nesbitt. Bringing up the anchor leg, last but certainly not least, we have Congressman Stephen Horsford, son of the Caribbean by way of Trinidad and Tobago, who is now planting roots in Nevada. So we're glad to have you out there, brother. Born and raised in Nevada, in fact, Las Vegas. The representative for the 4th Congressional District. Mr. Horsford is the first person to hold this seat and the first African American to serve in Nevada's federal delegation. Amazing how you just see history. It's like history shouldn't be that young, but I guess we still got some barriers we got to break. Before running for office, he served as the head of the Culinary Academy of Las Vegas, where he worked with local unions and Nevada hotels to train thousands of unemployed or underemployed Nevadans for work in the hospitality industry. In 2004, Congressman Horsford was elected to the Nevada State Senate, and in 2008, he became Nevada's youngest and first African American state Senate majority leader. Congressman Stephen Horsford. Welcome. Yes. It sounds like Charter Day, a convocation. Folks just keep coming. That's all right. Sister Nicole Isaac has joined us from the White House Office of Legislative Affairs. Welcome. All right. So now, let's see here. We all have our marching orders. So I'm going to ask everyone. They'll give, roughly speaking, about 7 minutes apiece, overview on the basic issues we'd like to raise as it relates to immigration reform, and I'm going to sit down, and from there, after everyone has made an opening statement, we'll then have some questions, a couple of questions, and then we'll field questions. Again, if you're out there tweeting, you can tweet those questions to @officialCBC or @HowardU with the hashtag CBC Talks, and we are indeed streaming live at www.facebook.com/Congressional Black Caucus. And with that, I'm going to sit down and ask Representative Jeffries if you'd like to, well, actually, would you all like to, it's up to you all. Oh, Representative Clarke, you want to lead off? Absolutely. Thanks.
Let me start by thanking you, Dr. Greg Carr, for being our moderator this evening, to the students of Howard University, to the professors and staff, to the administrators here present, and the president of this august institution in absentia, to my colleagues and fellow panelists, my colleagues in the audience. It's certainly my honor, my privilege to be back here at Howard University and to share in this moment a bit of our thinking as members of the Congressional Black Caucus with respect to the debate that is raging on the Hill, the jockeying that's taking place in anticipation of a piece of legislation addressing comprehensive immigration reform being brought forth in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. As you heard in my introduction, I am a second-generation American. My parents came from the Caribbean island of Jamaica, West Indies in the 50s. My brother and I were born in Brooklyn, New York. Yes, I do eat curried goat. Don't let the accent fool you. My father insisted that I speak proper English, so I ended up with this Brooklyn accent. But I start off with that because I grew up in an immigrant family, a family that came to the United States. My parents came as foreign students and decided they wanted to raise a family in the United States and use their talent, their skill, and their expertise to building community and, by extension, making their contributions to this nation. And so I am disheartened when I see what has happened in the 21st century with the immigration system of the United States of America. It has basically grounded up humanity within its bureaucratic churning. It has succumbed to the worst inclinations of humankind in terms of treatment of one another. And we have an obligation to turn that situation around. The United States of America is a nation of immigrants, built by immigrants, for immigrants. Now, as I refer to my brothers and sisters of the great kidnapping forcibly brought to this nation, the longtime stakeholders, they too have an immigrant past. And with the exception of Native Americans, we all have come from other nations of origin. And so when we look at the dynamic today, we have to look at a number of things. For the people of the African diaspora, what does our existence in this nation truly mean? How do we continue to make contributions to this nation, and how do we make sure that our contributions are felt in perpetuity? When we were brought to this nation, we had big families. Why? We had to work the farm. We were rural for the most part. And many who have immigrated come from large families. But something about modern America has made those family sizes diminish over time. We are not replacing ourselves in the numbers that we had heretofore. And so when you look at the population of people of African descent in the United States, while there has been significant growth, if you project further out, you will find stabilization of that growth and ultimately a decline of that growth unless there is continued immigration of people of African descent. We have an opportunity in this moment to recognize many who are amongst us who are out of status. I want to make a distinction for you. Most immigrants of African descent come to the United States documented. So when you hear about the undocumented, it's typically in reference to individuals who can cross a border by being landlocked with the United States, as opposed to having to fly in. So what we've found is that people arrive in the United States under a visa of some sort. In many cases, and you'll hear from one of our panelists, children are brought by their parents. Family members come to visit. People come to work. And ultimately, it will be up to those individuals to make a determination about how they govern themselves when they're in the United States. Part of that governance is determining what your future looks like, what the demands are on you and your family. Many of those who come to the United States, particularly to work, are coming with a desire to not only build here, but to be able to help their families back home. Remittances to the Caribbean region and the continent of Africa have kept many a family afloat. When you look at the disparity in the way that those economies have developed versus other economies around the world, it is those remittances that make all the difference in the world. In addition to that, you have our students. And our students come and they learn, receive their degrees, are some of the most learned among immigrant groups. And oftentimes they're ready to give their talents back to this nation. But because of the restriction, the stipulation of their visas, they're unable to. Some make the decision that they are driven to stay here. I tell people, and jokingly all the time, in New York City, we have blended families. We have that part of the family, that person in the family who is a U.S. citizen. We have someone else who has come and has received their green card, they're registered, they're a resident of the United States. And then we have that uncle who came to visit and never left. All contributing to the growth and development of our families and our communities, all giving their all to the strengthening of who we are as a people. And so I wanted to put this conversation in context because oftentimes we don't see ourselves in the immigrant population. And I want you to know that there are over 3 million people of African descent who are either first or second generation immigrant families. And they too need comprehensive immigration reform. With the rampant deportations that have taken place, when you think about the challenges that we as people of African descent, black people, face in our communities in terms of policing strategies, the damage that is done to the immigrant family surpasses what any of us could ever imagine, because it results in what they call family fragmentation. If you are deported from the United States, you are barred from reentry. And so I wanted to just put a few of those concepts out there. This is not just a Latino issue. And we need to be conscious of that, because there are many out there who would exploit any division that they can create between ourselves and our Latino brothers and sisters in their struggle to reform this broken system. We have skin in this game. We have skin in this game, and we need to make sure that we enlighten our civil society, that we recognize that with all of our talents and skills and our shoulders to the wheel, we can move this nation to the next level. We can only do that if we extend the opportunity to those amongst us who need to upgrade their status, who need to come out of the shadows and give their full potential to this nation through comprehensive immigration reform. So once again, let me just thank you for extending this invitation to engage in this dialogue. I look forward to answering your questions and exchanging with you your thoughts about this topic. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, and to Dr. Carr and to Dr. Scott, the other distinguished faculty members and administrators who are present, of course to my panelists, members of Congress, as well as this wonderful Caribbean American dreamer who's present. Let me acknowledge, of course, again, Congressman Al Green from the great state of Texas for his presence and his leadership on this important issue. It's an honor and a privilege to be here on the Howard University campus. I think the last time I was here was more than a decade ago. I was participating in the step show. Somewhere out there's a video that I hope never surfaces. But it's wonderful to be back on the Howard University campus. Such tremendous history, of course, here, and an important part of Black America and the African diaspora and all of its many manifestations. Just to add a few thoughts and perhaps some context to the wonderful job that Congresswoman Yvette Clarke has already done. When the founders of the CBC created this wonderful entity, the conscience of the Congress, they had a choice, I gather. They could have named it the Congressional African-American Caucus, but they chose the Congressional Black Caucus. And I gotta believe that part of that selection of and the precision with which the word black was chosen means that CBC members have an obligation to stand up for Black America, which essentially connects us to the African diaspora. And that means people from the African continent, that means people from the Caribbean, and of course that means African Americans. And those, I would argue, of African descent who may be Spanish speaking from South and Central America. Now, if you think about the African American struggle, we on the task force and in the CBC believe that the current struggle for comprehensive immigration reform can be traced back to the liberation struggle and the fight for full citizenship that African Americans led in this country. A comprehensive immigration reform, in its best outcome, would lead to a pathway towards citizenship for all of those who are here and either undocumented or out of status. Now, we know, of course, as African Americans, we had to fight to be treated equally with those who brought us here in chains and enslaved us. But in some particular ways, our struggle, the struggle of the abolitionists, was about citizenship. In 1857, the famous Dred Scott decision. If you take a look at it, Supreme Court decision, some say it opened the door to really dealing with the question of slavery once and for all. In America, that 1857 Supreme Court decision was about citizenship. So Dred Scott was a slave. His master had him enslaved in Missouri. Missouri was a border state. And as a border state, slavery was still legal. But at some point, Dred Scott's master moved them to Illinois. Illinois was a free state. And so as a result of Dred Scott being moved to Illinois and spending some time there, he came to the conclusion with those who were advising him that he was no longer a slave based on the change in location. And so he sued for citizenship. Case worked its way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in a very infamous, horrible decision, 7-2, I believe it was Chief Justice Taney, came to the conclusion that any black, whether free or slave, has no claim to citizenship in the United States of America. That the white man had no, black man had no rights that the white man was bound to respect. It's all about citizenship, and as a result, they concluded that Dred Scott didn't have the standing to petition to have his rights enforced in court because there were no rights for him to claim citizenship. And so, after the Civil War, of course, you had initially the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, and then there was the 15th Amendment, providing a right to vote that would be unencumbered as a result of race. Long struggle followed to make that a reality, and we're still fighting that fight, even on today. But the 14th Amendment, which contains clauses that many of you may already be familiar with that are often talked about, the Equal Protection Clause, the Due Process Clause. It was one of the most significant, if not the most significant, Reconstruction amendments. The first clause in the 14th Amendment actually is the Citizenship Clause. Anyone born in the United States of America is a citizen. That was inserted there directly to deal with the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision. It subsequently has been used to open America up for immigrants all across the world who themselves may come here unlawfully, but if their children are born in America because of the 14th Amendment, because of the Dred Scott decision that the 14th Amendment was designed to deal with, those children are American citizens. So if you trace the citizenship struggle back, African Americans, we believe, have an invested interest in continuing to ensure, based on our own struggle and legacy, that second-class citizenship in any form should never exist in America. And that is why we completely support comprehensive immigration reform that ultimately leads to a pathway towards citizenship for immigrants of every background, including those from Africa and from the Caribbean. Thank you.
Good evening. It's great to be here. I'm Stephen Horsford from Nevada, and it's very humbling actually to be up here on this panel. I want some credit for the information that my colleagues, Representative Clarke and Representative Jeffries, just shared. I think all the students deserve a little extra credit for that too, because that's knowledge, you know, in a very real, relevant, applicable standpoint. And so I want to also thank Howard University, the students, the faculty, the administration for allowing us to come here. You know, we have what Congressman Jeffries and I like to call Hour of Power every Monday night, where you can literally tune in to C-SPAN, where we take to the floor for 1 hour as members of the Congressional Black Caucus to talk about issues that are important to our community, our constituents, and our perspective in the House of Representatives. And so we're bringing that hour of power right here to Howard University, and we really enjoy having this opportunity. Congresswoman Clarke provided the context. Congressman Jeffries talked about the historical perspective. I'd like to just frame a little bit of the guiding principles of comprehensive immigration reform, and then turn it over to our dreamer here for his perspective, and then hear all of your questions. I'm a new member, but I gotta say that the Congressional Black Caucus has helped me to understand very quickly why our perspective in the House of Representatives is so critical. When we were debating what legislative priorities we would have, immigration reform became one of our top 3 priorities. And it was because of the impact of immigration to our communities. I come from Las Vegas, and my district is very diverse. It's majority white, 25% Latino, 15% African American, 7% Asian. But yet and still, of that diversity, I can tell you I've learned in just the last 100 days more about immigration and what it means to all communities, not just to the Latino community. And now, more than ever, is why I believe we need a comprehensive solution that benefits all communities and not just the Latino community. As Dr. Carr said, my mother is from Trinidad. My grandmother was born there. And I believe Alden's experience, just having talked to him briefly, is much like my mother's, in that she was brought here by her mother as a teenager. She was only 14. And after a severe stroke that my grandmother had, and after being pregnant with me as a teenager, she ended up staying beyond her authorized time. But because of that, I'm here, and blessed to be here. And so I send a shout out to all my Trinis to the bone, as Congresswoman Clarke would tell me. And yeah, I eat curry, and I want some roti. So some of the guiding principles, first and foremost, is we believe everyone should have a pathway to permanent citizenship. That's a guiding principle. And these principles are adopted by what's called the Tri-Caucus, which is the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and the Asian Pacific Islander Caucus. So first and foremost is everyone should have an opportunity to a permanent pathway to citizenship. The second is that we have to continue efforts to improve border security. Something that is not just critical to the southern border, which gets so much focus, but to our northern border and to our ports of entry, where more than a majority of people actually come through. And under President Obama, significant progress has been made to strengthen the security of our border. We believe that that is something that has to be continued so that those who are coming to our country through our border, through the ports, legally are able to do so in a safe manner. The third guiding principle is that immigration policy should reunite families. Immigration policy has always been about family reunification. And right now the debate, particularly from members on the other side, is trying to have the focus be all about jobs and workers. Immigration policy at its foundation has been about family reunification. And so we believe that that has to be a cornerstone, a principle. A fourth guiding principle is that while we support the need for attracting the best and the brightest to come to the United States to help contribute as entrepreneurs, as students, and we want to incentivize that, we need to do it in a way that does not exploit individuals, whether it be workers or whether it be students. And so those have been the guiding principles that all three caucuses have agreed since the beginning of this debate. Now, the Congressional Black Caucus has identified additional issues beyond those guiding principles that we as the CBC believe have to also be addressed in a comprehensive bill. Some of those include the criminal justice issue that Congresswoman Clarke talked about. The fact that African and Caribbean immigrants are targeted in ways disproportionately in our criminal justice system, as have African Americans, that we need to ensure that those criminal justice issues aren't used against individuals in their pursuit towards a pathway to permanent citizenship. And so making sure that the laws as developed take that issue into mind. Another area that we as the Congressional Black Caucus have put on the table has been around STEM education. HBCUs like Howard University have a role and responsibility to develop our students around science, mathematics, and engineering. But yet and still, they will incentivize corporations to be able to bring individuals here on a STEM visa. Those same corporations aren't expected to make investments into colleges and universities like Howard, that is your mission. And so we have said that any increase in the STEM visa has to come with an investment into historically black colleges and universities, as well as Latino serving institutions, so that we can develop our own while we attract others from around the world. And so these are some of the additional guiding principles that the Congressional Black Caucus has put on the table. Now, I just want to close by saying we are at the cusp of doing something very big in this Congress. And I believe that under the President's leadership and at this historic time, I feel very optimistic that a comprehensive immigration bill is before us. But we have to be careful not to accept just anything, and to engage all of our communities to make sure that the bill that is proposed and ultimately adopted and sent to the president takes into account all of our community's needs. And so my urging to all of you here is to be engaged, to use tonight's forum as an impetus to get even further involved. We have members on the House side who aren't all online with some of the proposals that we've made as the Congressional Black Caucus. There are individuals who would love to pit certain communities against each other in this bill and to create wedge issues in and amongst our communities. There are those who want to benefit the private sector, but who don't want them to invest in the things that we know need investment, like education and STEM. And so my urging to you is to participate in these months ahead as we debate this policy and to make sure that we get this right for all communities, particularly for the African and Caribbean immigrants who, without your contribution, our nation would not be what it is either. So thank you very much for being here today.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the Congressional Black Caucus, my fellow panelists, and Howard University for giving me the opportunity to tell my story. I know it's hot today, but I'd like to take you guys back to 12 summers ago. When I was 10 years old, my sister was 16, my brother was 17, and my mother was a special education teacher in Trinidad and Tobago. And we lived in a regular 2-bedroom house, and trust me, if you think this is hot, you don't know Trinidad. And I was getting ready to go into what you will call middle school, and my brother and my sister just graduated from high school. And my mother was in a car with some of her colleagues who were going to see a recruiter, a professional recruiter from New York City. She had no interest in being recruited or coming to the United States. She just tagged along. The recruiter looked at my mother and said, "Hey, are you a teacher?" She said, "Yes." And the recruiter said, "So what are your qualifications?" My mother said she has a master's degree and 2 bachelors. And the recruiter looked at her and said, "You are exactly what we're looking for." So my mother said, "Okay, that's nice, but I'm not going anywhere without my children." And then the recruiter said, yes, you can bring your children, everything will be taken care of. With that fool's gold, I like to call it, that lured me and my family into the summer of 2001 to come up here. And I'm not gonna lie, I watched TV for, MTV and I was excited to come to the United States of America for opportunities. Ever since I was a young boy, I always wanted to be a doctor. I don't know what it was about the white coat and having a DR in front of my name like Dr. Carr. And I see my mom sat down with all of us and asked us, "What do you think about this opportunity?" And there was not one no. There was bright faces in the room. There was enthusiastic, young, opportunistic children ready to seize whatever opportunities New York City had to offer. And that summer we came up here and it was amazing. It's a good thing we came in the summer because it was easier to, transfer, and we didn't come in the winter time. In 2001, we came up here and I was only 10 years old, so I don't know about the immigration system, I don't know about the policies, but I enjoyed myself. I went to middle school, graduated high school, and I seen my mother every day struggling with work, and then she had to go to meetings. I didn't understand why is it that she had to go to these meetings, right? I graduated middle school, graduated high school, went into college, went in to do liberal arts to start off, to start my career, to see if I could go become a criminal psychologist, because I'm really into the criminal mind and trying to figure out why criminals do the things that they do. And my first 2 years in college was like anybody else's first 2 years in college. Still young, excited. And then I turned 21, and this is where the entire story goes, away. I turned 21, and then I get a letter from the USCIS, right? And through the 12 years I've been living here, we've been getting letters, we've been paying fees, hundreds, thousands of dollars, assuming that this was our pathway to permanent residency. But at the age of 21, and this is how university, a lot of people turn 21. Everybody know what they're supposed to be doing when they turn 21. That's supposed to be a more exciting part of my life. That's where I'm supposed to be getting, more excited. And then I get a letter saying that literally I had 90 days to leave the country. Because of immigration policy, we paid every fine. We waited in every line. We did everything that we was told that we were supposed to do to be on a pathway to permanent residency. And because of, not because of my negligence, but because of a broken immigration system, me and my sister ended up aged out. And my sister at the time, right now my sister has an 8-year-old son. He's a citizen. He was born here. And just like me, I'm pretty sure he doesn't understand the struggles that his mother has to go through. He doesn't understand why his mother can't drive and take him to school. He doesn't understand why his mother can't work to give him clothes or, to give him the toys that he wants for Christmas. He doesn't understand these things. Maybe one day he'll understand, but right now he's only 8. And as the system is right now, for him, a citizen, to apply for his mother to become a permanent resident, he has to wait until he's 18 years old. So that's 10 more years she's going to have to wait, on top of the 12 years she's already waited. When I turned 21, that was one of the saddest days of my life. And I say it over and over. I shut my phone off. I locked myself in my room. I did not know what to do. I couldn't go to school. I was in school for 2 years, pursuing my dreams, couldn't go to school. All my identification expired. And I live in Brooklyn. I don't know if you know much about Brooklyn, but there's a lot of cops. And I'm one of those people that they stop just because they can. It have nothing to do with, the dreads. It don't have nothing to do with me being a criminal or nothing. I'm a good college student, no, bad background, and they will stop me. And not having an ID is now a crime. And on top of that, I could get put in detention for not having my paperwork, right? And detention is not jail. Jail is for citizens, it's for permanent residents. Detention is a room that God knows what happens in that room, that they could put you, move you around from state to state. The closest detention facility in New York City, by the way, is in New Jersey. That's not close. Your parents can call to find you. I could only imagine the people that had to experience this. Luckily for me, I never ended up in the situation, but I have been stopped, and I've been scared enough to know that it's happening every day. My mother, fortunately, is not the type of parent that sat down and took what she was given. She stood up for herself and started the Association of International Educators. I met up with Bertha Lewis of the Black Institute, which I am a member of right now, and they've met with politicians like Yvette Clarke in the past, and they fought to somehow try to speed up the process for the teachers so that the children wouldn't be aged out. Unfortunately, today, in 2013, kids are still being aged out. So the Association of International Educators had a meeting where they started being concerned about the children's issue. And me and my co-chair, Mikhail, we showed up to this meeting, and at the end of the meeting, I had a list of questions because I didn't know much about immigration at the time. I went up to the president of the Black Institute and I said, who is in charge of the children? Who's in charge of these aged out children? And she said, hey, since you asked, why don't you do it? So me and Mikhail, we started the International Youth Association, and because we think it's unfair for people who was asked to come to this country, who was taken up, just like the slaves that came from Africa, who was asked to come here to teach in the worst possible New York City schools. It's unfair that these teachers have to beg for something that they expected. It's unfair that these teachers have to, see their kids suffer, see their kids go through depression, and see their grandchildren. My mother does not know what to do. She's in a situation where she does not know what to do. And that's why we started the International Youth Association, to take care of these kids, to help them, to talk to them and say, hey, you know what? You might be in a position where you think that nobody understands. It might be very depressing. You might not know what to do, but hey, at least me and Mikhail is going through the same situation, and we're trying to find a way. We're sitting down with politicians like Hakeem, Jeffries, and Yvette, Clarke, and, talking to them about legislation and how it could help us in the future, somehow, right? And we spoke about it before, and it's unfortunate that in this country, when you hear the word immigration, the first thing comes up is Hispanic or somebody illegal that comes across the border. Because a lot of us came here legally. Like she said, you have uncles who living in your house and you don't even know. Why he don't get up and get a job? What's his problem? He can't get a job. It's illegal for him to get a job.
We know Trinities will have multiple jobs.
Right. Right. We want the opportunity. We did not come to the United States of America to say, hey, let's slouch down and be on benefits or just live in somebody's house. We came here because we want to fight. We want to fight for what we want. We want an opportunity, and trust me, you give these young, educated. My sister has a culinary arts degree in business management. She makes some of the best red velvet cake you've ever tasted in your life, right? And she has this degree and has no opportunity to do anything with it. She got offers from Universal Studios Orlando to come be a head chef and had to turn it down. My co-chair over here, he bachelor's degree in architecture. We was walking by and he seen the engineering school and he was like, man, he wants to continue his career in engineering. Right? I would like to tell you one of his stories is one that really shocked me, because when you go to architecture school, you have to go around and see different structures, travel out the country, travel to Chicago and see different structures. He couldn't do that because he was unable to travel as an undocumented. And this is unfair. It's unfair. And the main issue I have, right, going back to the fact that immigration is seen as a Hispanic issue, is because a lot of people, they prefer to stay invisible. They think that is easier. They think that, that their problems are being covered up by not talking about it. And I must admit, I was embarrassed. When I was 10 years old and I went to middle school for the first time, and I put my hands up and they asked me a simple question, what's the answer? And I said, tree. And everybody in the room looked at me like, it's 3, not tree. I was embarrassed of my accent, but sitting here next to Yvette, Clarke, who has a background in Jamaica, and you have a background in Trinidad and Tobago like myself, and I'm pretty sure many of you have people who at home who are, not just Caribbean descent, African descent, from all over the world. And that's why we started the International Youth Association. Because we believe everybody deserves a fair chance and an opportunity. Whether you're black, Hispanic, white, whether you came here at the age of 16 or you came here at the age of 20, it doesn't matter how old you are, or where you're from, what your nationality is, everybody deserves an equal opportunity for the pursuit of happiness that the United States offers to everyone.
Thank you. Okay, yes. Thank you, Brother Nesbitt. I'm sure folks have questions, and we'll get some instructions on the social media dimension from Ms. Drain, our Executive Director of CBC. Oh, my goodness, you done handed me the... All right. Thank you. Very nice. I see why she's in charge. This is smooth as silk. I love it. Okay. We're probably going to start with the folks who are in the room. And it's very interesting in listening, and we have 2 microphones here. So if folks want to start coming down, I just want to say very quickly, it's interesting listening to everyone's presentation. Congressman Jeffries, when you framed it by the 14th Amendment and Dred Scott, it just struck me the parallels. When you're talking about a fight for citizenship for 4 million people in 1860 who were not intended to be citizens. But our fight lays the floor for everybody's fight in this country. And it's very interesting that the influx of people of African descent into this country really doesn't emerge outside of that forced migration until really 1900. After the Spanish-American War, you see people coming. And of course, over the next 20 years, you got cats like, I guess, Egbert Williams. I think his folks were from Barbados. Bert Williams, we know, the great performer. But probably the most famous person to come in that first couple of decades to this country was the Jamaican Marcus Garvey. And of course, he was deported. And you see, that issue, but the Caribbean outburst really begins in a groundswell. But before that, there are exclusions. And the first exclusions are really based on whiteness or access to whiteness. Folks from North Europe, folks from Western Europe are allowed to come in. But at the same time, you see labor, the Chinese Exclusion Acts, you see in the last quarter of the 19th century. They're defining citizenship even as they are expanding citizenship. But then you expand it by saying who's not a citizen. Native Americans, I don't think, get citizenship till like 1924, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to remember the statute. But at any rate, as that whiteness expands to include citizens, whiteness is still an incremental fight because the Southern Europeans and the West and the Eastern Europeans aren't included in that until into the 20th century. And then you get past World War II, and now there's a reconfiguration. But the thing that is consistent is if you have skills, maybe we'll figure out a way to keep you. If you don't know how to, we're not just going to bring contract labor here. So you see legislation passed, federal legislation passed. And then, of course, after the 1950s with the revolutions in the Caribbean and Africa, that's when you see the groundswell. 11-year-old Stokely Carmichael's parents come, bring him from Trinidad and Tobago. Eric Williams, who taught here at Howard in economics, who became the first prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago, coming here. The engineers and the architects, you see that happen at the HBCUs. You see that happen. And so, but then very interesting enough, that plateau in the 1960s, and I think 65 was the last major legislation before now. So what you all are trying to do is basically overhaul something that has been almost in a sense of stasis for the last 3 generations. And but it's all around this perpetual struggle over who is an American. And with the shifting demographic, this is the face of America. And increasingly, whether it speaks Spanish, French, Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Patois, Creole, it's the face of America that has changed. And what you all are going to do is going to lay the foundation for citizenship, not only for people of African descent, but probably for everybody else in this country. So we owe you a real debt of gratitude. And I'm going to get out of y'all's way. If we could go here first, Bob, and then back over here.
My name is Johnny Young, and I'm the Executive Director of the Migration and Refugee Services of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. We've been very active, as you may know, in really fighting for comprehensive immigration reform for quite some time. In 2007, we thought we were almost there, but we lost. And we lost because the opposition outspent us. They were ahead of us in terms of contacts with the Congress. And the word we're getting at the moment is that they're ahead of the rest of us at the present time. I really want to thank you and the members of the panel and Howard University for putting this program on. I can't tell you how long I've waited for this, to see a more active participation from the black community in this important issue that is before us. And I just want to put a little plug in. Tomorrow on the west lawn of the White House, there will be an immigration rally, and there will be a Catholic Mass at St. Aloysius Church tomorrow at 10 o'clock. But you have done a tremendous job in terms of providing the context of what we would like to do. But what would you like to tell this audience in terms of what they have to do to keep the fire under the legislators in order to see that this program, this reform, actually succeeds? Thank you.
And I've got my eye on the clock, so if we all answer this, want to make sure that everybody who's in line, I think we can accommodate them, but nobody else. And then we'll ask the questions from Facebook and Twitter. If they overlap, maybe I'll just integrate them in, and I'm going to get out of y'all's way. So if you keep your questions very short so we can get everybody. And now, please, sorry.
What you can do. First, many of you are students from other states and communities. Contact your local congressional member and ask them where they are on comprehensive immigration reform, and not just generally, but on the specific issues we've touched on tonight. I don't want to make this partisan, but I do want to call out, there are those who will allow people to come here and work for lower wages and tied to an employer, but who do not want to offer a permanent pathway to citizenship, and who do not want to address the criminal or social issues, social justice issues that we believe are part of the reform that's necessary. You can't tinker with one part of the system and fail to address these other issues. And so when they're in the room negotiating, unfortunately, there is no African American or African or Caribbean immigrant in any of these negotiations on the immigration bill, in the House or the Senate, on either side. So when the bill comes out, it's going to be a very short window to make sure that these issues that we believe have to be incorporated in the final bill are there. And we need you to put pressure on every person who's elected in the House or the Senate to do the right thing. And then one other thing, join forces. Comprehensive immigration reform will only be passed with a broad coalition of support.
Yes.
Again, my district is very diverse, and I have a working group of constituents from every walk of life, Asian, African, Caribbean, Latino, black, white, who support this issue and the need for it for fundamentally the same reason, but with different perspective as to why. And so as you come to the Hill or lobby on support of this, make sure that all of our brothers and sisters, regardless of their background, who share in our view, are also part of this debate.
Actually, the second question from Facebook and Twitter was, what would you like to see included in the comprehensive immigration reform bill to meet diverse needs of all immigrant populations? So that kind of dovetails very quickly. Is there anything specific that has emerged from the conversations that might draw people together, that might be a specific populations issue more than others? Is anything that comes to mind?
Well, the way we've looked at sort of the immigration reform debate, you have the 11 million undocumented or out of status immigrants who are in the country right now. And we've got to create a very robust pathway towards citizenship for them. But we also want to make sure that from a forward-looking perspective, once we pass comprehensive immigration reform, there will still be a legal immigration system by which people from across the world can come into the United States. It's going to be different, but we want to make sure that as it's adjusted, as it's changed, that there still is an opportunity for people of African descent from a forward-looking perspective to be able to come into this country. And we're looking at the different vehicles that currently exist, family, work, and also a mechanism called the Diversity Visa Lottery System, which is a system whereby people from underrepresented countries from across the world have an opportunity to apply to become citizens and immigrate into the United States. Now, when this program was first conceived, I believe it was under the Kennedy administration, it largely benefited immigrants from Ireland. But over time, the complexion of the program has changed to the point where in 2012, about 50,000 diversity visas were issued. 24,000 went to people from the African continent. And so it's a significant forward-looking mechanism right now to make sure that people from the diaspora have an opportunity to come to the United States. We want to make sure that things like diversity are preserved, either in its current form or in a mechanism that is just as strong, if not stronger, than the vehicles that currently exist. Thanks. Please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dahlia Walker Huntington. I'm a Jamaican American, and I'm from Florida. So I am very happy to be here with you and for the Congressional Black Caucus's involvement in the immigration debate. It is long overdue, and it's highly welcomed. Representative Clarke, you touched on something. You said that we are all from big families. As this debate continues, and with the House and the Senate, it has leaked out, sneaked out, that in the compromise that has to be reached for something to move forward, that it's possible that there are two categories of immigrants that might be eliminated. One is the married child of an American citizen, and the other is the brother-sister of American citizens. Those are the two longest waiting categories, 7, 10, 12 years. However, as immigrants from the African diaspora, we live 2, 3, 4 generations in one household. And so if you remove the ability of my brother to come to the United States, who's going to take care of me because I have no children? Who's going to take care of my mother when she gets to be old and she gets to be a grandmother? So as you move forward in your discussions, I'm directing this specifically to the 3 members of Congress to ask you, and to the representative from Texas, to ask you not to take away the ability of mothers and fathers to file for their married children, not to take away the ability of brothers and sisters to file for their siblings outside of the country. And I'm going to ask you to put one thing in. If you are a son, an adult son, and you've filed for your mother, let's say, and she has an 8-year-old daughter, Trinidad, Jamaica, wherever, that 8-year-old daughter is not deemed a derivative, so she cannot come to the United States when her mother gets a green card as the immediate relative of that adult American citizen son. She has to leave that 8-year-old child behind. So you talk about family reunification and the breakdown of families. She has to leave that child behind because that child is considered a sibling, and there's a category for siblings, so that child cannot come. So those are the 2 things that I've journeyed from Florida to ask you all to please leave in and to give us. And I am going to meet with my congresspeople on Thursday. I have a meeting at the White House. I'm not calling names. I did reach out to a senator from Florida. They never call me back. But, you know, I'm going to keep on keeping on. And thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I don't know if you're clear, of course.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing that perspective. You need to know that with respect to the whole issue of siblings, that is a major issue for our colleagues in the Asian Pacific Islander community as well. So we have some areas where we can coalesce. We can't suffer in our silos. We need to break down these silos so that we design a 21st century immigration system that suits the needs of a growing nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Clarke. Please.
Yes, good evening. My name is Pamela Clarke, and I'm a graduate of Howard and Georgetown University. I'm a STEM major. And I understand and I support the guiding principles that the congressman talked about, and I really was happy to hear Mrs. Yvette Clarke talk about the fact that her parents came here as F1 students, because I am an F1 student. But my concern is the STEM immigration visas. I read a release that was sent by Congressman Black Caucus Chairwoman Marcia Fudge, where she was talking about the fact that I guess there's a if they throw out the diversity lottery visas that he talked about, that's the only way they could have STEM immigration reform. A lot of the students who are here from Africa and the Caribbean are STEM majors. Thousands of us stand to benefit from those being able to sponsor ourselves. I get emailed on a daily basis. I just came from AACR, the American Association of Cancer Research, presenting my data. One of few people who was black and of Caribbean descent there. So I'm really imploring you, as you are going about addressing comprehensive immigration reform, that you do not fight the STEM immigration bill, because it is inclusive of everyone who has majored in STEM, whether you're Asian descent. I do acknowledge that a lot of the people who are STEM majors here are from Asia, but there are a lot. 9 out of 10 of my friends from undergraduate here at Howard and grad school at Georgetown were STEM majors. And we have no opportunities when we graduate, because everything STEM is tied to the federal government, especially in this area that's 40% of the jobs. And if it's not, private employers discriminate against you, and you can't. So by President Obama pushing the STEM immigration reform, if there is a way that you can keep your diversity visas and the other options and have the STEM immigration bill, it will include a lot of people from the African descent. Secondly, you talk about...
Make sure, I just want to make sure that one thing I was going to do, I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure we get through, because we only have about 10 minutes or so. So this is what we're going to do. I want to make sure, if it's all right with you all, for everybody to make their very quick comment, and then maybe you all can make some general response to the broad panoply. That way we can make sure everybody's voice is heard. And I've already spoken enough. That's enough. That's about how long it'll be for everybody's question.
Okay. What is your proposed plan for people who come here as international students, whether they're STEM majors or not? The gentleman talked about the fact that when you have an H-1B visa, you're tied to that person, and that person may not sponsor you. What is your plan for their path to citizenship? Because right now, as it stands, it includes marrying an American or waiting for your job to sponsor you. So what is your plan for comprehensive immigration reform? I support this young man and his fight, and I do want to speak to you more about your organization, because I know people in that plight. But for those of us who did come on the plane and didn't walk across the border and paid our dues and paid our tuition and pay our taxes, what is your proposed plan of action, aside from the H-1B, that we as people come here who are educated in fields that are needed by this country, in terms of having our path to citizenship?
Thank you. We'll get the next. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Deanna McFarland. I am a sophomore English major from Memphis, Tennessee, and I attend Howard University. I am also the resolutions chair for the NAACP, and the NAACP does have a resolution that calls for all-inclusive immigration reform. So I would like to know what specific bills are on the floor right now in Congress, and what you all are doing to engage organizations such as the NAACP and the Urban League to support those bills.
Thanks, Dean. All right. Yes, please.
How you doing? My name is Chris Jones. I am the president of the Caribbean Association at NIH, National Institute of Health. I'm also Blacks in Government. I am the Public Relations Committee Chair for Blacks in Government also. I guess everybody hit my question so far since I got up here, but I wanted to say this. I know your struggle. First generation, myself, graduated from school. Sorry, kind of nervous. But the point I wanted to make with you, with this new laws that's coming out, with the immigration laws that's coming in front of us now, New York Pacific, since a lot of us is from New York, I'm a New York native myself, what are we going to do about the stop and frisk law inside New York? Because that is targeting mostly immigrants. That's all they're going after. They're not, it's supposed to be taking crime down, but I have relatives who just come into New York. First, they still haven't got all their paperwork yet. They have to walk around with the papers just because they might be stopped by New York police. And we also know about the riot that just went off a couple of weeks ago inside New York. How it seems like it's an education to educate black people about the immigration, and also motivate us to actually do something about it. Because it seems like we are sitting on the sidelines. And I guess my question is, how are we going to motivate our people to get off the sidelines and actually, instead of just a parade, every year, Labor Day, instead of just coming for that, actually jump in line and let's march down Eastern Parkway and shut that down just for immigration, because there's enough of us there. So, all right, end of my time.
No, thank you, brother. All right. I hope I'll just get a few more. Yes, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rodney Nickens. I'm with the National Black Justice Coalition. We're a DC-based civil rights organization dedicated to empowering the Black LGBT community. An issue that is particularly salient and important to us is the Uniting American Families Act, and so I'm interested as to the support and stance of the Congressional Black Caucus on this particular piece of legislation within comprehensive immigration reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Rodney. That's actually the second of the three Facebook, Twitter questions. Immigration reform in the black community. What does it look like for the black LGBTQ community? So that kind of was it. Oh, yeah, we could actually, yeah, if that's all right. If that's, let them, and then we'll take the last cluster. That's right. Please, please.
I wanted to address the sister who was a STEM major. It's not an either or. It's not an either or. We're trying to make sure that we're not abolishing opportunities for people to come to the United States through as many mechanisms as possible. We know that continental Africans in particular have been using a vehicle very successfully to come to the United States. And why would we abolish it at this time if it ain't broke? You know, don't fix it. So I clearly understand where you're coming from. There was a second part to your question that had to do with
the H-1B.
The H-1B, the pathway and being tied to employers. That's something I think we have to look at. And I know there's a lot of discussion about decoupling right now, that provision. We're going to have to get behind that decoupling. In the 21st century, we cannot abide with the exploitation of workers. And if that's a foundation principle of a 21st century immigration system, then it cannot be embedded in legislation that we're using as the vehicle to get us there.
One of the other issues that I'll speak to, the last brother who spoke from NIH mentioned concerns related to disparate treatment by law enforcement as it relates to people of African descent. And as Congressman Horsford mentioned, one of the things that we're concerned about and we've put on the table, there was a very draconian immigration so-called reform bill that was passed, I believe, in 1996, that took away a lot of judicial discretion and also created a foundation for people to be ejected from this country for very relatively minor misdemeanors, for instance, and even notwithstanding the fact that they may be legal or on the pathway toward a legal immigration status. And so what we've said is, because we know that the reality in America is that black folks, Africans, African Americans, Caribbean Americans, will continue to be disproportionately targeted by the police in New York City alone. 50,000 arrests every year for misdemeanor marijuana possession of small quantities of marijuana. The overwhelming majority, it's the largest single category of arrests anywhere in this country. About 80% of the people arrested are black and Latino, even though statistics show that affluent whites use marijuana in equal, if not greater numbers. But they're not stopping and frisking anybody on the NYU or the Columbia campus, so they come up with a whole lot of marijuana.
How about that?
So what we've said, given the reality that we've come a long way in America, but we still have a long way to go. Jim Crow may be dead, but he still got some nieces and nephews that are alive and well. That as part of comprehensive immigration reform, we need to look at some of the things that happened in the 1990s to make things more punitive and soften them, modify them, make them fairer and more equitable, so that if we continue to be subjected to disproportionate engagement, the consequences and the things that this young brother feared will be taken away.
There was that other sister who was from the NAACP, the sophomore sister.
Yes.
There is no legislation yet. They're in the process of actually crafting the legislation. And what you're hearing leaked are different provisions that they're trying to finesse to come up with what ultimately will be comprehensive immigration reform, which is why the CBC has stood up its operation at this time, because we're not at the table. And you know what happens when we're not at the table. We end up being the lunch. So we have got to, we have stood up, and we're 43 strong in the House of Representatives. Nothing passes without it being run through the CBC. An issue as important as this one, if the CBC does not go for it, it does not go. It does not go.
Was there, and I'm good, this last cluster, I think there was maybe one lingering question. Brother Rodney asked about the LGBTQ community, and yes, if there's any.
That is the LGBT community, and uniting families is a part of this legislation.
Excellent.
It is a part of this legislation.
Thank you, Councilwoman Clarke. So we'll get our last cluster then of comments. We can just keep them kind of rapid fire one after the other, and then y'all can respond, and then we'll close out. Please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Gabrielle Jackson, and I am originally from Trinidad. And the reason why this affects me is because I would be one of the people affected by the law. I've been here since I was 9, and so I think every child who came from Trinidad had that tree story. I went through and said tree in class. So the question I have is that more so, has there been discussion about the timeline that it would take towards citizenship, but also including those who would have been excluded, for example, with a waiver. Some people who came into the country uninspected do not qualify. Anything you know and you think you know about immigration, just marry a citizen, that doesn't just qualify everybody. So everybody has to get educated on that, but do waivers get considered in part of this plan for someone who would not be included if they were part of the current laws? So that's my question.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Zach Murray from the Center for American Progress 2050. My question is about unemployment. There's sort of a myth that exists that immigrants from the Caribbean or Africa are faring better in this current crisis because of the obvious work ethic that they enter with, the sort of 2 or 3 jobs that you referred to. My question, if you look at the statistics, from 2007, black immigrants were 5.6% unemployed, and in 2010, sort of at the start of the recovery, experienced 12.4% unemployment. That's pretty much parallel to the African American experience. How do you use immigration to address the lingering, persistent racial discrimination that's there? And a part 2 to this question would be, in addition to STEM, how do we deal with workers who are not in the desirable fields, so farm workers, restaurant workers? How do we ensure that they're protected as well in this legislation? Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Please.
Great. Good evening. My name is Kumar Gannett. I work at the National Council of La Raza. Before that, I worked in different CBOs over here dealing with the immigrant community, and my parents are from Ethiopia. What I wanted to ask were 2 things. One, 4/5 of all immigration visas do go for family reunification currently, so we're really talking about 1/5. So with that said, are you interested in raising the total number, or are we going to still be more negotiating about percentages of the total number of immigrant visas yearly? And then the other thing is the 2020 census. It's really, really hard to map the African community and the Caribbean community, particularly 2nd and 3rd generation. Even here in DC, there's very little reliable statistics about any of the communities here. So what are the CBCs, or have there been any discussions about different ways to map the community so that we can have more data about it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tara Cannon, and first of all, I just want to really thank the panel. I believe that this issue is so timely. I'm Black American with family connections in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and I do a lot of volunteer work in those communities. And I just want to do my part. So I would like to volunteer. If anyone is interested, I would like to volunteer to coordinate contact information, letters to Congress, lobbying efforts, rallies. So if anyone is interested in seeing me afterwards, I do believe that we need to join forces. So thank you.
Can we hold up on these last Please. 4 and
in fact, okay.
and answer some of the questions?
Please. Yeah, I think it might be the police.
I'll take the employment issue So one of the provisions that has been leaked, I guess, is the issue for worker visas, particularly farm workers, and I think it will hopefully apply to other low-wage worker industries, is a recognition that employers who utilize workers do so paying more than a prevailing, or more than the minimum wage, so a prevailing wage, so that what has been occurring in the broken immigration system is fixed, where employers are able to pay people under the table, they're able to pay less than minimum wage, they're able to pay piecework. Those are things that there appears to be agreement between the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO around establishing a prevailing wage, which will eliminate the exploitation of a large percentage of people in those demand areas. You know, my background, I ran the Culinary Academy of Las Vegas, and we trained several thousand people a year for careers in the Las Vegas hospitality industry. One of the things that I found in our training program was our employers, all the major hotels in Las Vegas, had to verify people who were authorized to work here, but other employers did not. And that creates kind of an unfair system for employers who are trying to do the right thing. So another provision and a guiding principle is that all employers will be required to do verification for individuals who are authorized to work here, and if they break that law or don't pay the wages as required, that there will be civil and hopefully criminal sanctions to those employers, and to provide more enforcement of that within the Department of Labor.
Thank you. Right. Did you all, please?
There was a sister who had asked about pathway to citizenship, and I'm
Waiver?
going through a senior moment. Oh, the time frame.
Yes.
That's something that's still in negotiation right now, and it's you know, this is a mammoth task. I mean, not only are we talking about the provisions of the law, but the mechanics of how it actually gets done. And one of the things that I had not stated previously in my conversation with you is that one thing we all need to be cognizant of is that oftentimes our immigrants come in their youth, and you know, they're here during the most productive years of their lives. To be sitting on the sidelines, unable to go further in their education or to be employed, you know, you come and you're 10. 12 years later, you're 22. 5 years later, you're 27. So you can see how the most productive years of your life can be spent just waiting for an opportunity to occur. If we make it such that it takes another decade for everyone who we're providing a pathway to citizenship for to actually get that, then we're not maximizing on their abilities to add value to our society during the time of their lives when they're going to be most productive. There was another question about
Somebody asked about the census 2020 and the number of immigrant visas.
Right. With the census, the CBC picked up on that actually during the 2010 census, and we are looking at the next census to actually begin to break down the categories. I was surprised, quite frankly, being a post-civil rights baby, to see that Negro was still the terminology for black people on the census form up to 2010. We're hoping that we can break out of this monolithic view of who we are as a people so that we can truly use the data to make things happen. And then there was another question about immigrants, right? And employment, and the high unemployment. one of the things that I found, because I come from Brooklyn, and Mr. Horsford talks about his district being diverse. You wouldn't believe how diverse my district is. But the one thing that I know about immigrants is that they are extremely entrepreneurial. They are job creators. They are job creators. And we have not given them the opportunity. If you're undocumented, it's hard to get a bank account. It's hard to be able to do the type of accounting to expand and grow a business. I think that there's going to be a major economic boom when we're able to give people the opportunity to avail themselves of the tools that we have available for entrepreneurs in America.
Thank you, Congresswoman Clarke. Let's get these last four. Were you about I'm sorry, please, Congressman Jeffries.
I was just going to make one quick point, that the time frame, while it's still being negotiated, I think there is uniform support, or close to uniform support, to the extent that can exist in the Congress, that in whatever the number of years that will be set forth for the 3 stages, initially undocumented, out of status, go to probationary legal status. From probationary legal status, you go to a permanent legal resident. And from a permanent legal residency, you can then pursue citizenship, that there would be an expedited pathway to citizenship for people like Aiden who fall into the dreamer category, that you were brought here as a child, either across the border, undocumented, or legally, but have subsequently lost your status, that both categories would have an expedited pathway towards citizenship to deal with the need to try and get people to a point where they can pursue their dreams and be productive educationally and professionally in the manner that Congresswoman Clarke talked about.
Thank you. Oh, you want to make a comment? Yes, please.
I just wanted to comment and say, I don't know if you've heard, but last summer there was the Deferred Action Program that Obama put into place. And I would like to hope that's basically the first step in the expedited process for people like me, which is great because it starts off by giving me opportunity to work. So I have employee authorization, an ID that I could finally have. The last 2 years I didn't have any ID. And with that ID, I could go get a driver's license. And like he said, my next step is a green card, which is permanent residency, and then citizenship. So I should be, basically first in line. I would like to comment and say that they should raise the age from 16 to 20, because my friend here came in, he was 16 and 3 days old, and because he came 3 days over the age of 16, now he has to go in the back of the line like everybody else and pay back taxes and pay a fine for breaking the law, which I'm pretty sure he didn't break any law at all, except that just like me, sit down and wait for something that he believed was his. And I also like to say you could follow us on Twitter at TIY Association, and on Facebook at TIA, TIYA, or you could just put it in the International Youth Association. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. All right. Please, you want? Well, go ahead.
First of all, I want to also congratulate the Congressional Black Caucus for the vision, and particularly under your leadership, Congresswoman Clarke, for coming here to Howard University. As an alumni of Howard, I am, again, interested in particularly how immigration is going to particularly affect our alma mater, because I would imagine that at Columbia we would have air conditioning, and hopefully,
Take an easy way,
some of the ideas that my organization, I represent an organization called STEM for Us, and we're an organization that is pushing to increase the numbers of H-1B visas, but at the same time make sure that the fees that employers pay is increased, and then some of that money can be dedicated to institutions like Howard University, because again we do need some capital improvement dollars to my alma mater. And I'd like to particularly ask you, Congresswoman, whether or not, as you might know, the I-squared legislation seeks to push this, and even companies like Intel are behind it. But have you engaged with some of these leaders to particularly make sure that some of the ideas that I remember you bringing forward when I was a Congressional Black Caucus staffer, such as Howard being able to, and other HBCUs being able to benefit from that money, is actually being advanced? And if it's not, can you give us some marching orders so we can have your back to make sure that happens?
It is being advanced. It is being advanced, and it's actually at this stage being embraced. So, I think that we should keep vigilant around it. There is some conversation about both capital dollars for HBCUs and Hispanic Serving Institutions, HSIs, as well as scholarships. So, if folk want to be active around something, that's one area that we can be very vigilant around to make sure that that reinvestment is made and that people stay true to their word. And your association could go a long way in sort of stamping that. And the young sister who's part of the STEM students of African descent, I think that it's important that, you guys reveal your preferences. All of that will go a long way in validating what the CBC has already stated is something that our communities desire.
Can I add one more point to that, to Congresswoman Clarke's point? We also need the HBCUs and the Hispanic Serving Institutions to get ready to compete or be in line to utilize whatever funds are allocated for that reinvestment that comes from STEM. And I know Howard University is at the forefront of that, but we've got a lot of HBCUs that come to the CBC, and their programs are under-resourced, they're underfunded, their enrollment is declining, and so to effectively utilize this resource to help turn those programs around, but also to focus on where there is the most demand, in the workforce. Because that's the argument that we're making as policymakers, and we need that to be happening in practice, with our partners at the HBCUs.
Excellent. Thank you. And that's actually the final Facebook, Twitter question. Y'all answered it with that one. We can be very quick. We're going to try to keep it right to 9:30 if we can, and that's 9:29 and some change. So, please.
Yeah, my name is Jean Purchase Tuller. It's one of those names that, you inherit, but you wonder how you got it because it's purchased without the E and all that good stuff. I teach here. I teach Spanish and communications and writing to the STEM students. So I have a vested interest in STEM, although I'm really humanities oriented. My issue is that a student who is in the STEM program doing excellently, for example, with a 3.9 cum, entering their senior year in September, almost dropped out of school. Reason being, she did not qualify for any kind of fellowship, grant, scholarship because she was Jamaican. She went to my high school, a girls' school, and she's really good, doing top research and everything. But because she doesn't qualify, not because of her average, but because of her status, she almost dropped out. So we had to hustle her around. I mean, actually me checking with a priest to try to get her some money, I mean, that is like, well, y'all don't know me, so you don't know. But she got enough, and she's graduating in May. But I'm saying, what of those students who really have dropped out? Because I walk a lot through the campus, and I live near here. And I was walking near Drew one day, and I saw a guy, and I asked for his buddy, and he said he dropped out. I said, dropped out? I thought he had like a 3-point way up in engineering. He said the same thing. So I'm asking you to see what you can do about those students who are in the shadows, who drop out and nobody knows about, or maybe they're not assertive because they say, okay, well, I don't really qualify, so what can I do? Then my other issue is about health care. This is a question, what is being done on the Hill for health care for the undocumented? Because if one person is ill in this room and doesn't qualify for health care except run into the emergency room because that's all they can get, they're making all of us sick, and we're all sharing the sickness. And Khalid was my, we used to live on the same street. Hi, boo.
Thank you, Professor Purchase Teller. Please, madam, be the last one. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sylvie Bello, and I'm with the Cameroon American Council. I just want to thank CBC and the Congress members for this great opportunity. We would love if you would continue to speak up for black immigrants, but especially our African immigrants. Unfortunately, a lot of times when the discussion comes up, and even today, our African immigrants and our experiences are not up front and center. For instance, with the workers program that's been proposed, we would love if you would consider including our hair braiders, since they're on season, non-seasonal, non-agricultural workers. And when it comes to highly skilled, yes, STEM is really, really important, but we'd like for you to consider other parts of highly skilled, such as nursing. In our black community, I mean, a lot of the STEM programs, I don't know how many Googles were started in CBC member districts. I don't know how many Instagrams, but I bet you a lot of health disparities are in our CBC member districts. If we do have nurses, physicians who can, who are part of graduate programs, who can get these STEM visas, who will not only benefit our community because, with the baby boomers and with President Obama's healthcare reform, it would greatly affect our black communities, and that will be a great way in which black immigrants and our African American communities can actually work together. We're also looking at small businesses, our African ethnic restaurants, our African ethnic grocery stores. As you're looking at the startup visa, please have them reduce the investment level. Because on U Street, when the Ethiopians came up to U Street was not how it used to be, was not in its vibrant shape. So the DC started recording tax dollars because of the Ethiopian businesses. When the Senegalese went on Harlem, 125th Street, the Somali Americans in Minnesota, many folks up Fulton Street in Brooklyn, and the Nigerians are out in Houston. These are all CBC member districts that small businesses are helping to grow. So when CBC is pushing for STEM, it should be pushing for small businesses within CBC districts. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
I actually have some gifts for you so you don't forget about Africans. And I checked in with your staffers. They all said it was going to be okay.
I know that's right.
May I approach?
It's up. You all?
And these are raffia bags, and in Cameroon it holds precious goods, from as folks travel from place to place. So as you're going to be going through the various judiciary, the different sessions and the provisions, please remember the comprehensive reform is so precious to us Africans. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sobi. Well, we've reached the end of our time together, and this has really been remarkable. And in fact, for all people who organized, and Sister Drain, thank you for making sure everything has come together. And if we would ask, I don't know if anyone has anything that they would be moved to say in closing, but if not by way of closing, then we can kind of move forward. But if anybody, please.
I really only have an announcement, and just want to again thank Howard University, the students, faculty, administration, and I neglected to acknowledge a sister who has been a real support to me ever since I was elected. She was the former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Dr. Elsie Scott. But on tomorrow, there will be a rally at 3 p.m. on the west lawn of the U.S. Capitol. Blacks need to show up and show out. It is an comprehensive immigration reform rally. So if students have a break, or if you know other folks, tweet it, Facebook it, get people out there. We need to make sure that we are in that number. There is a black face to comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you, Congresswoman Clarke. If you all are, all right. In that case, then, if we could then have a collective round of applause for Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Congressman Stephen Horsford, Brother Alden Nesbitt, and the members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Of course, Brother Green is here. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you. Good evening. Go ahead. Hey, man, what's up? You put it where it's supposed to be, man. No, that's right. The lobby, we put it right there.